Hello my quilting friends! My name is Leah Day and welcome to this video on loading a quilt diagonally on your Q-Zone hoop frame. So this is going to be good for the Q-Zone hoop frame Pro, or the Cutie frame. And this is specific to these frames because we clamp on all sides of the quilt in order to hold it in place. So why would we want to load a quilt diagonally? Well, in this case, I have a design that I want to be able to quilt through these spaces, and these spaces run on the diagonal of the quilt. So I've got a square here that's on point, and then basically these channels that run diagonally around it. And ideally, I'd be able to quilt all the way across that if I set up the quilt, if I kind of rotated it here, and loaded it this way so it's running diagonally across the frame. And the reason that I would be able to quilt more of that section is because, think about it, we're using the arm of the machine, we're able to quilt that section in one pass, versus if we had it the other way, I'd be able to quilt maybe 5 inches tall space, and I have to do that over and over and over again in order to quilt that design through that area. So let's get started. I'll show you how to do it. So here's the quilt on my Hoop Frame Pro. You can see I already quilted this section across, and so that space would just exactly fit into the arm of my machine. So I want to make sure to load this so that this space I can quilt all the way across in one go. So here we go. I'm going to shift this back, make sure my foot is up so that way I can shift the quilt underneath. And I generally get this in position, and I want this space here centered up on the frame so I know I can quilt across it. And the thing that I found that's a little bit tricky with clamping on a hoop frame is you want to leave a little bit more space than you think here between that back clamp and where you're going to start quilting, because you'll find that whenever you push your machine over, sometimes your foot, like here in this case, it's like the back of my foot is stopping me from being able to quilt further back. That's actually hitting that clamp. So this actually looks okay, but I might want to shift it forward just a little bit, just like by 1/2 of an inch. There we go. And then I'm sure when I roll the machine over, then I'm definitely going to be able to quilt back there. So that looks good. Now let's roll forward. And like I said, this is right on my edge. I have about 5¼ inch quilting space here. So if I leave it here now, I'm not going to be able to quilt as close as I'd like to this edge. So I'll be honest, this takes a little bit of fiddling, especially if you were trying to clamp and quilt kind of what I'm drawing here right on the edge of what you can do, of what you can fit within your machine. And yes, you will have more space if you are using a long arm. If you have like a Cunique 15 or a Cunique 19 on your frame, you will not have this limit of space. Okay, so this looks good. I'm about 1/4 inch from that back seam and about 1/4 inch from this front seam. So I'm happy with that. So once I get the center set, I'll go on ahead and roll this up. So just like loading a quilt regularly on the hoop frame, I'm going to roll that up. Now I'm not using leader cloth. I'm not using the hoop frame leader cloth here because that would be pinned to like that edge. It wouldn't be all that helpful actually in this situation. Instead, I'm using the quilt itself and rolling it up in order to clamp this in place. There we go. All right, so now we just want to make sure that we're straight across. So it's making sure whenever you attach these back left and right clamps that the quilt stays straight. So if you put it on and you see that it's tighter over here, you can see that's only about 3/8 of an inch from that clamp. This is about 1¼ inch. Then you know that you're shifting it just a little bit too much that way, a little bit too far back. There we go, clamp again. One more try, 3rd time's a charm. There we go. I think that did it. There we go. Roll that up. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky because of course we have less fabric over here, but I'm more towards the middle of the quilt, so that's okay. What I find is as I lose kind of quilt edge over here, I might end up taking one of my little mini leader cloths, these little squares, and actually pinning it to this side if I need to. But in this situation, I think that looks really good. Now we'll run a quick test here just to make sure that I'm straight. And you do that just by simply pushing the machine over, making sure that you're not going to run up against anything and suddenly not be able to quilt your full range of space. Okay, so let's shift over here and again try and do the same thing, trying to make sure that this side stays nice and straight. Going ahead and give that a clamp, and it looks like I did a better job this time because, yeah, my machine's mostly staying straight against that seam. So that's running nice. And I'll pull up these back clamps here. My machine likes to roll. I clearly need to do a little bit of leveling on this frame. And so I oftentimes will use my channel locks, which are a standard accessory with hoop frames, and I'll lock that down so that way it can't roll away from me. Okay, with our back secured, now let's work on this side. And as you can see, this is just a little bit on the weird side in comparison to how we would normally clamp a quilt. We would normally have this be a straight edge over here, something that I could easily pin to and clamp to. So what I'm going to do is just kind of invent it using this little piece of leader cloth. I'll line this up so it fits nicely. And then I'm just going to insert 3 pins all the way through all 3 layers of the quilt. Just like so. Alrighty. And as you can see, that's not going to reach all the way over here to do the side clamp. So what I'm going to do is pull off my bungees on this side. I'm going to take my side clamp here. We go upside down and click that in place. And then I insert both of my side clamps. Just slide those in place. They have a little white bracket. Just like so. And then now I have this little adjustment knob. I can pull that out, give myself a little bit of slack on these. And I like to fold this over and then clamp and clamp and then tighten it up. So just press on that little adjustment knobby thing and we're good to go. But you know, probably before you want to do the sides, you really want to do this front. Because as you can see, this is getting just a little bit wonky now that that side is pulling. So I'm going to undo those clamps. I'm just going to release those. And let's get this front nicely clamped. So I've got one of these long clamp bars. Push that straight down. And this is, you know, like I said, this is the tricky side because it's really on that diagonal. Just press down. And you don't want too much tension. You still want that to be kind of bouncy tight. There we go. That looks good. I've got enough quilt over here on this side that I can just take and press this clamp straight down. That looks good. And then I can reclamp this side just by simply clipping these in place. So I can again fold that over, clamp, and clamp. So I think definitely do back first and then do your front clamps, get those in place. Make it nice and flat, nice and smooth across. Then set up your side clamps, just like how you normally would load your Q-Zone hoop frame, your Cutie frame, your Hoop Frame Pro. It's just on the diagonal. That's the only difference. And of course, you have to kind of make up a little bit of space here. You might find that you have to pin another little square of leader cloth back here if you need to. But that is going to make this so much easier. I'm going to be able to quilt all the way from here, all the way over, knock this whole space out all in one go. Can't wait. So that's it for this video. Yes, of course, I could have loaded this quilt the traditional way by pinning it to leader cloth, rolling it up, and putting it on the frame just like normal. But then I would only have been able to quilt little sections out of these spaces at a time, rather than being able to quilt across the entire channel all at once. So it really saves time to be able to load and put that space that you want to quilt parallel to the rails of your frame. Now, this works specifically for hoop frames because we're clamping on all sides. We have clamps to the back, front, and sides, and that's what holds the quilt in place. This also allows us to quilt any size quilt on these frames. So the sky's the limit when it comes to your creativity. I think this is definitely going to save you some time if you have a quilt that's pieced with diagonal rows like this. So definitely give it a try. If you'd like to learn more about the Q-Zone hoop frame, the Hoop Frame Pro, or the Cutie frame, you can learn more about them on my website, leahday.com/grace. I am a Grace Company dealer, and I love sharing these frames, which allow you to put a home sewing machine on a frame, get a lot more quilting time in, a lot less strain on your body. So come and check them out at leahday.com/grace. Until next time, let's go quilt.